Good morning. Thank you, Sam. Hello to you. Good morning. Bow our heads really quickly for serving us. Dear Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for allowing us to gather today, blessing us with your wonderful word of the Spirit. Please bring the Spirit not only into my delivery of the message, but also into those that hear it, allow it to open their minds up to your wonderful presence in their lives. We love you, Lord. Amen. Good morning again. This week my mother, a couple weeks ago, she called and said, I need you to speak, and then she called and said, I need you to do it on outreach. And I had something else in mind. I said, okay. So I started reading the Bible, and I hit the scripture, Romans 12:1. And all of a sudden, it opened up to me the importance of service and outreach. Romans 12:1, if you open it up, states that, therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. And I would impart, I know for what I do in mental health, I see people and I see us in all states, our best and our worst. And I know that it is not natural to us to be in service. It is not natural to us to be in sacrifice. In fact, it is natural for us to serve ourselves, so it's very easy for us to get up and find out what we want, what's good for us, what makes us happy. But it's not natural to us to look around and understand what the needs of people around us are and how to specifically serve them. Here Paul is telling us that sacrifice is true and proper worship. What happens is when we are our natural selves, and we try to please ourselves, we enter into a contract that really does not work because we are not people that are easy to please. If you ever notice anybody that has a lot and indulge themselves, they tend to be very entitled, highly demanding, and hard to please because they're used to having people try and get them to achieve satisfaction through self-pleasure. It just it's not natural to us because it is not what we created for. It's not the purpose that God designed us. In fact, God designed us to be of service and to be loving to others and to put that love into action. And that love into action is what allows us to achieve this purpose, and then we'll be able to achieve satisfaction. We'll be able to be satisfied because we are doing what God intended us to do what He created us for. In Galatians chapter 6, God says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently, but watch yourselves so you may not also be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and this way you fulfill the law of Christ. A large part of service is understanding the needs of people around us and understanding how to put ourselves in a position to serve them. God gave each of us talents and gifts. He gave us, all of us, a job and purpose to do. It's important that we find in that purpose how to be useful to others. In fact, science teaches us that people that are in society are the most satisfied are those whose skills are being utilized in service to others. If we're not in those situations, we can feel as if we're not appreciated because we're not putting ourselves in a position to understand how we're truly valued, which again is valued in service. And it's a living sacrifice. And we know that something that is living and breathing. It's something that is active. It's not dead. Scripture tells us faith without works is dead. And if we are not active as a living sacrifice, then our faith is not active and living, and it is dead. A dead faith is not going to be helpful to us or anyone else. It will not allow us to grow. It will allow us to be stagnant. And I think a lot of what we get confused about service and sacrifice is that service and sacrifice is not intended for self-pleasure. Service and sacrifice is intended for self-satisfaction. And pleasure and satisfaction could be two different things. When we serve, it's often we put ourselves in situations where we don't gain, we don't put ourselves ahead. We actually put ourselves in situations where we are sometimes abused and sometimes tortured for what we do. When we take a position to help those that are underprivileged or less than fortunate, we're often put in a position where we have to share their burdens, as I've read in Galatians. which means, because sin is action is oppressive. Sin is something that allows us to take advantage of someone else. Sin allows us to push our own needs and agendas over others. It allows us to ignore the needs of people around us. And it allows us to be self-seeking and in some cases barbaric. But when we offer ourselves a living sacrifice, we put our needs aside, we pick up those things that allow us to combat this oppression, allow us to combat the things that around us that are keeping people in situations where often they cannot find God because they are overburdened by the oppression of life. And it is our job to put ourselves in a position to help them find help them find relief, and help them be in a position where they can free up space and time in their lives to connect with God. Now, service is not always convenient. Service is difficult. Service requires sacrifice. And there are lots of sacrifices in service. And you think of the many ways you can serve. People think, well, service is just about, going overseas to help serve people in a country where they have very little, and that's amazing service. But there's service around us every day that we forget. There's service in our neighbors. There's service in people at work who are suffering, who really need to be connected. Psychologically, suffer in marriage, suffer in depression, suffer in a lack of understanding, suffer in finances. And if we're in a position to assist them through service, they can understand what it is to be connected to a Christian and likewise be connected to God. But again, service is not serving yourself or not getting that pleasure. Service is in serving someone else so that they can become connected to God. One of the difficult things about service is that once you serve and do well by others, people don't throw a parade for you. When you serve, it's something that immediately you're going to see what the connection is. Because service does require sacrifice. And the living sacrifice is you in your life and what you do. And a lot of people get involved in service and they don't really get to see the outcome. They do it and they are frustrated by the people around them because people aren't always grateful. They also get angry because people will not always tell you the outcome of what your service did for them. That might happen way down the road. So it is essential that we learn to have perspective that God will give us to teach us the power of our service. And I think one of my favorite prophets in the Bible is Elijah. Because Elijah was chosen to serve God. His whole life was about service. And he served in Israel. And Israel was a difficult place to serve because at that time the kingdoms were split in two and Israel did not choose to follow God. In fact, they followed Baal, and Baal to them helped them be hedonistic and do what they wanted to do. In fact, the whole prospect of Baal is prosperity in the world. That's what they wanted. They served Baal. And Elijah had to deal with Ahab, who wasn't the best of kings, and he married a woman, and she was not a good wife or a good person. There Elijah is tasked to deal with Israel, and he didn't feel very appreciated, and he didn't feel as if his daily tasks were leading to fruition. So at one point, God allowed Elijah to demonstrate to the Israelites clearly that he was present in their lives. He said, we're going to go to Mount Carmel, and I'm going to show you that I exist. I'm going to show Israel that I exist. If you remember the story, they go up to Mount Carmel, and they had a great contest. The contest was between God and between the prophets of Baal. They both get up there, and they're trying to demonstrate who's God. If you remember the story, the prophets of Baal, for hours, attempted to get Baal to speak, and Baal did not speak. And they demonstrated everywhere they could have. They even went and got swords and cut themselves, whatever, because they were going to sacrifice with their blood, show that Baal talked to us, but did not. But then Elijah's turn came, and God spoke. He spoke. Remember how he spoke? Fire from the sky, took out the altar. Clear demonstration of God. Something we would all like to see in our life. One day we'd like to take people and say, here, I'm going to show you God exists. He's going to shoot lightning from the sky, and there he is. Everybody believe. We think that would work. But we can see from this story that it really doesn't, because after that great demonstration, Elijah was excited. He was riding a high. He was like, this is amazing. God has shown that he exists, and Israel is with me today. And not only that day did he show that God existed, he also sent rain on Israel because God had denied rain from Israel because of their actions. So he said that day, remember Elijah went, he waited on the mountain. God said he waited for that cloud, and finally he saw that cloud, and he ran ahead of that chariot. And he ran ahead of that chariot, he was so excited. And he got to Israel, and rain came, and it was good, and all was good in Israel, because God had declared his presence, and Elijah was excited. Now, God had come to Israel. But as Paul Harvey said, there is a rest of the story. Because when Elijah got back to Israel, he was excited, but somebody else was not excited. You remember who was angry? Jezebel. Jezebel said, he did what? He killed who? All right, we're going to kill Elijah before the day is over. I want to rid him from Israel. Elijah, upon hearing this, got scared, as many of us would, and took off. Took off. So I'm out of here. And he ran into the wilderness, no food, no water, gone. Right? And Elijah was very frustrated, as it can be, because Elijah said, my service is for naught. And so he sat there after he ran and sat in that wilderness, looked up at the sky. He was upset. He sat with God. He sat with Israel. And he said what a lot of us say, something that made no sense, but it made sense every time. He said, God, kill me. Have you ever said that? Take me out. Kill me. He said, kill me because nobody cares. There's no one but who? Me. I'm it. So go ahead and take me out, because all this service stuff is useless. And so God did not honor his request, thank goodness, because Elijah had more purpose than to be killed in that wilderness. And you know, God took Elijah on a long journey. He finally got there. God spoke to him. First, God made demonstrations of nature that, kind of shook Elijah. But he didn't speak to the demonstrations. He waited and he spoke to Elijah in a calm, assuring, uplifting, encouraging voice. And he said to Elijah, do you remember what he said to him? Pardon? He said, go do your job, basically. He said, there are people in Israel, you remember the number? 7,000 who have not bowed down to Baal. And they're counting on who? You, to do your job. So go back and do your job. And did Elijah go back to do his job? No, Elijah did his job amazingly well. So well that God sent something for him, if you remember. And took him where? Took Elijah to heaven. You think, does Elijah's story end there? It does not. Because Elijah was not only chosen to encourage Israel, he was chosen to encourage God himself. Because if you remember, remember the transfiguration? Who was there? Elijah and Moses. Two people could understand what? Frustration, people, and service. Both of them had served mankind, and they knew we were how? Difficult to work with. And we are. Right? They came down to encourage Christ and say, listen, keep with it. We need you. Christ himself. And if you can imagine Elijah, when he was out there in the wilderness saying, kill me, God, what was God thinking? I'm not going to kill you. I need you. So many of us don't think of service in terms of being needed. But that is where you find your value, because in service is where you'll know that you're needed and highly valued by God, because God is present in those you serve. In fact, the Bible says, where two or more gathered, there, where am I? There I am also. Many of us attempt to serve God on our own through trying to be good enough. I'll tell you, it's a difficult task. It will never be good enough. It's okay. You don't have to be. What you do have to do is you do have to serve. Because Christ was good enough. What we have to be is of service. Because Christ came in this world not to be served, but to serve. And he came as a sacrifice. And our job is to follow those footsteps and do the same. Now, I know it is not easy to sacrifice because there's many actions to sacrifice. For example, forgiveness is an amazing example of sacrifice. I must sacrifice my anger. I must sacrifice my tendency to want to give revenge in order to give you love. Is that easy? There's a story of a woman whose husband was taken out by two people that had hate in their hearts, racist people. A young man took her husband and dragged him behind the truck and killed him. And the young man died, and of course she was upset that such hate could live in the world, such hate could take her husband. So they went to trial. Well, the young man that killed her husband saw what he did, couldn't believe it, and was overwhelmed with guilt. Didn't know what to do. Overwhelmed with it, went to court, got sentenced, bowed his head, looked over her eyes with tears and said, I'm a horrible person. I'm terrible. Can you forgive me? You know what she answered with? You're already forgiven. Already. Now, is that sacrifice? To sacrifice, she sacrificed her son for the man to have love in her heart, to give him the opportunity to know God. Now, most of us have a difficult time connecting with that because we do live in a world that teaches you to serve God. It teaches you that sacrifice doesn't make much sense. Your job is to get yours because it is competitive. And when we sacrifice, we put ourselves in a weaker position. And who does something like that? We're supposed to be on top. But Christ put himself in the weakest position of all for your sake. As his disciples said, he was hung on the cross, which was an embarrassing death, to provide redemption. And in fact, and one of the wisest things ever told to me, a gentleman who came to one of my programs, he said, you know what I've learned? And I said, what have you learned? He said, I've learned the things that I thought were weak were actually the things that made me strong. And the things that I thought gave me strength, like money and power, were the things that destroyed me. And to find true strength, we only find it through sacrifice. And remember, it is living through you and not dead. And we all have talents. We all have the ability to serve. I work with a lot of people that don't know their talents. And when they say, I don't have my talents, I don't know where they are. I say, well, no, my talents are buried. I say, you better go dig them up. Right? Because somebody needs them. And if you need help, I'll go help you dig them up. And when we find out what they are, we're going to put you in the best position to succeed. Many people in this world are not in the position to succeed or benefit from resources. They're not in a position to understand how their talents can be utilized to benefit others. In fact, they might not even know what they are. But if you're willing to sacrifice through Christian leadership, through mentorship, they can find themselves. They can find God, and they can find their service. And in that service, they'll find satisfaction. They'll find peace. They'll find stability, which many people in this world do not have. One of the things about being alive and existing in service, there's a lot of people who feel dead inside because they serve themselves. And when you serve yourselves, you tend to gather things that give you temporary satisfaction. We have a huge crisis of drugs in the world, and a lot of people don't understand how can people do this. It's easy to become addicted because they provide us with some control over how we feel. They allow us to escape from things that we often cannot deal with. And so when they use drugs continually or use anything that we're addicted to, every day more and more of them dies off. They become more and more enslaved to that thing that's controlling their lives. And what they don't understand is their job isn't to escape. Their job isn't to find a way to be happy in their misery. Their job is to find their purpose and learn to connect and serve. At that point, no longer will they be dying inside, but they'll be living. And living things grow, they flourish, they multiply. Dead things, they fall and disappear. So like Elijah, you don't know what the end game is. When you serve, and there are many people who stood in line, who stood up for the underprivileged, who stood up for people that had their rights taken away, stood up for people who had little to nothing, and were shamed or lost a great deal because of it. And they could look and say, in this world, what have I gained as a result? But they don't know. Because down the road, God will show you your purpose. And the wonderful thing, and this is the best thing about services, we might try and be validated based on what other people teach us or guide us. The world wants us to be validated by things. You know, someone said earlier in Sabbath school, the car, the house, this prestige, that's going to give us value. But I've learned, most people aren't thinking that much about you. Most people think about themselves. Most people you're not going to get value because other people are jealous of what you have. You are going to get value is when you take what you have and learn to share it with others and learn to be useful. And in your Christian belief, the most valuable thing you have is your connection to Christ. Your ability to share that is going to give you great value beyond what you have in things. And this is something that is experiential. You have to do it. I can tell you about it all day long, but you have to do it. Once done, you'll know what I'm talking about. And it's something that you'll continue to do because that's the only thing you can find satisfaction in. The great thing about living sacrifices is that it connects us to not only what Christ did for us, but allows us to be known by Christ. Because Christ looks and he calls people who served him and his people as his faithful servants. Because they were willing to sacrifice and give, he's willing to cover them with his blood. And so I know it can be easy to be, so I've been this way before, to be in faith and doing all you can to be good enough, to learning the doctrine, learning what you can tell them, knowing the Bible well, and looking at it and saying, I'm in the same place. Look at all those sinners out there. And I'm glad I'm not them. But you are them. We're connected to them as human beings, and you have a job. Your job is not to look down on them. Your job is to connect with them and share Christ. And you don't know. They can curse at you one day and love you the next. And you don't know until you get down there and do it. Because one day that person can look at you and say, because of you, because you were willing to sacrifice, I am where I am today. And that's when you'll learn and you'll understand value. Because I know from Elijah's point of view, and we've all been in the wilderness. We've all been frustrated. We've all said, Lord, this just isn't worth it. Go ahead and take me out. And luckily, God is an encouraging God is an encouraging God. He will fill us with the hope. He will fill us with the necessary resources to get the job done. And I know there are many stories about people who want to serve God, who look up and say, show me the resources. And I know I'm on time on my way there, so and I'll end with a story because my daughter, who sometimes struggles with her faith, suggested we watch a movie, and I watched this movie with my in-laws about this woman who wanted to serve. And it's an amazing story because she lived a life of oppression. She was born to an alcoholic father, put in a home where she was mistreated by the people who had no value for her as a child. She was beaten up, taken advantage of, raped, married a man who was abusive. Just things that you would think would be difficult to survive and still be connected to God. But she still went to church and she still talked to God. And one night, she started having dreams about orphans in Vietnam. A woman had never been to Vietnam, didn't know why she had these dreams. So she lived her life, worked for an oil company, and retired after her children were grown, and went to Vietnam. And said to the Vietnamese, I'm here to help. And they had no job for her. They said, we'll help our own people. So she went and said, I can give you a temporary visa. She got one. She started working but got very frustrated. And one day, she just looked up to God. She said, listen, I'm going to walk and you take me where I need to go. So she walked into an orphanage and she walked into service because they needed her. She got that visa. She rescued 700,000. 700,000 because she was there to serve. And your service is waiting for you in the same way. You just have to look up and say, God, lead me and take me there. And he'll take you there and you'll get there. And like Elijah, you won't feel like you're the only one. You'll feel like God is with you and you'll be highly valued. Thank you. You bow your heads. Dear Lord, thank you for today's message. Thank you for watching over us. Please help us to understand our obligation to serve. Please help us understand that through us, you can do great things. We just have to be willing. So let's take the time to sacrifice and take the time to understand that it's very important and very valuable to love others. We love you very much. Amen. You have a final hymn here somewhere. Our closing hymn is number 311, I Would Be Like Jesus. Dear Lord, please help us to lead today. Open our hearts and minds to how we can listen to your words and be like you. Please help us to live the life of service that you intended, so that like in the words of this hymn, we can hear you say, job well done. We love you, Lord. Amen.
Amen.